The quiet morning of June 14th, 2024, in Evansville, Indiana, turned into a nightmare when 4-year-old Octavia Aquino was found unconscious and cold to the touch in an apartment on Spring Valley Road. What initially appeared to be a medical incident turned out to be something far more sinister, the result of a prolonged chain of missed opportunities, ignored warnings, and fateful decisions that led to the death of an innocent child. Octavia Aspen Aquino's story began on May 10, 2020, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where her parents, Destinee Rhodes and Brandon Aquino, lived. The birth of the little girl brought immense joy to the extended family. Though legally, Octavia was under her mother's full custody, her father played an active role in her life and often took his daughter to stay with him and his mother, Linda Alvarez. Fate had it that grandmother Linda became the person who essentially raised Octavia. As the girl grew older, she spent more and more time with her grandmother in Fort Wayne. After her parents separated in late 2023 following 7 years together, Destinee and Octavia moved to Evansville, settling in Spring Valley Apartments. Destinee worked at a nearby McDonald's and shared her apartment with 2 roommates. Despite Octavia being a cheerful child who got along well with the roommates, the girl always looked forward with special anticipation to her father's visits when he would take her to her grandmother's house. The journey from Evansville to Fort Wayne took nearly 5 hours, but Octavia never complained. She knew that ahead lay a whole week of happy life with her loving grandmother, visits from her father after work, arrivals of Uncle Caleb's family, and fun games with her cousin Jeremiah. Everyone who knew Octavia described her as a bright, happy child. She laughed often, easily made friends on the playground, and loved spending time outdoors. At home, the girl never got bored either. She played with toys, drew, colored, loved dressing up and using children's makeup. In the evenings, she watched her favorite cartoons, Paw Patrol, Jurassic Park, Powerpuff Girls, My Little Pony, and Cocomelon. In the final months of 2023 and early 2024, Octavia spent most of her time with her grandmother. During this period, her mother's life began spiraling downward. Destinee developed serious legal troubles and strange connections that ultimately led to tragedy. In early 2024, events occurred that should have been a serious warning sign for all child protective services. During an investigation into a missing teenager case, detectives discovered a shocking connection between 15-year-old Christian Gonzalez and adult Destinee Rhodes. According to police documents, Christian disappeared from his home in Fort Wayne in February 2024. After police found him, the teenager was placed in a youth shelter, from which he quickly ran away. Searches led to Christian being found at Destinee Rhodes' home. Given the significant age difference between the 15-year-old teenager and the adult woman, authorities transferred Christian to a youth assistance center and then returned him to Fort Wayne. Shockingly, Destinee was arrested for an offense against a minor in connection with Christian's case. However, the teenager disappeared again, coinciding with the time when Destinee's case was being heard in court. In an attempt to protect the teenager from the adult woman, a protective order was issued against Destinee Rhodes on behalf of Christian Gonzalez. This document was supposed to guarantee that Destinee couldn't contact the teenager, but reality proved entirely different. Under these circumstances, it's astonishing and deeply disturbing that Octavia was allowed to remain under her mother's legal custody, even though she effectively lived with her father and grandmother. The child protection system failed. Despite clear evidence of the mother's inappropriate behavior, no one initiated a review of Octavia's living conditions or questioned Destinee's ability to ensure her child's safety. On June 10, 2024, at Destinee's request, Brandon brought their daughter from Fort Wayne to Evansville. Octavia was supposed to spend the next week with her mother. If only Brandon and Linda Alvarez had known who was hiding in Destinee Rhodes' apartment, they would never have brought the girl to her mother. But unfortunately, they didn't know, and a chain of tragic events was set in motion that could no longer be reversed. Upon arriving at her mother's place, Octavia found herself in an environment completely foreign to her, which, as it later turned out, was extremely dangerous. In the apartment, besides her mother and her roommates, there was that same Christian Gonzalez, the teenager against whom the protective order had been issued. But instead of complying with the order's conditions, Destinee not only communicated with Christian, but also allowed him to live in her apartment where her young daughter was present. To those around him, Christian was known as Alex, and few knew his true identity or the history of his relationship with Destinee. Finding herself in this environment, Octavia was essentially left to fend for herself, as her mother had to work, and the care of the girl was often entrusted to the 16-year-old youth, who was completely unsuitable for this role. On the fateful morning of June 14, 2024, the quiet Evansville neighborhood was shaken by a horrifying discovery on Spring Valley Road. Around 9 in the morning, one of Destinee Rhodes' roommates named Carly found 4-year-old Octavia unconscious and cold to the touch. In panic, Carly rushed upstairs to alert the two other women, Sydney and Megan, about the terrible situation in their home. When all three women came downstairs, they were met with an alarming scene. Destinee's boyfriend, known to them as Alex, who also lived in the apartment, was sitting on Octavia's mattress next to the motionless girl, looking disturbingly calm. This calmness starkly contrasted with the severity of the situation and alarmed the women. They immediately called an ambulance. The arriving paramedics desperately tried to resuscitate the little girl before rushing her to the nearest hospital. Working tirelessly to save Octavia's life, they couldn't help but notice the troubling marks on her fragile body. Bruises resembling fingerprints near her jaw and neck, numerous bruises on her legs, and human bite marks on her right arm. These signs clearly indicated that the girl had been subjected to violence, and this was no accident. Destinee was notified of the incident, and she soon returned home. Octavia's father also received the terrible news. Brandon, his brother Caleb, and their mother Linda immediately left Fort Wayne. They faced several hours of tense driving. They could only pray for little Octavia, who was fighting for her life alone. The family arrived 5 hours later when doctors had already stabilized Octavia's condition and connected her to life support. Unfortunately, the girl's condition remained extremely critical with minimal brain activity. The doctors were frank with the family. The chances of survival were minimal, and even if Octavia survived, the brain damage would be irreversible. When police arrived at the scene, they found the three women and the teenager in the upstairs bathroom. Destinee soon arrived, and all four women were taken to the police station to give statements. Alex, who turned out to be 16-year-old Christian according to documents, wasn't initially questioned, citing his age. But the more the frightened women spoke, the more disturbing the picture became. By that same evening, Destinee Rhodes and Christian Gonzalez were arrested. Gonzalez was placed in a youth assistance center. At that point, little Octavia was still alive, and the initial charges were as follows. For Rhodes, domestic offenses, dependent neglect, contributing to juvenile delinquency, and invasion of privacy. For Gonzalez, battery, aggravated battery, and false informing to public administration. The investigation into Octavia's injuries revealed disturbing facts about negligence and missed opportunities. Destinee's roommates told authorities that Christian Gonzalez, known to them as Alex, had moved into the apartment with Destinee and Octavia just a few months ago, in April 2024. This meant that Destinee not only violated the protective order, but also put her daughter at risk by allowing a teenager with a questionable past to live in the same space as her child. Sydney, one of the roommates and Destinee's friends, provided detectives with a chilling account of events that occurred on June 13th, the day before Octavia was found unconscious. Sydney and Destinee left for work around 11 a.m., entrusting the care of 4-year-old Octavia to 16-year-old Christian. This decision was already irresponsible, leaving a small child in the care of a teenager, especially one with whom the mother had a complicated and problematic relationship. When Sydney returned home around 2 p.m., Destinee still hadn't finished her shift, which was supposed to end at 4. Upon entering the apartment, Sydney was met by Christian, who asked her to examine a mark on Octavia's neck. According to Christian, the girl had woken up crying, claiming that a cat had scratched her. Although Sydney noticed red marks on Octavia's neck, she was much more concerned about the bruises on the child's face and what appeared to be a human bite on her arm. When Sydney asked Christian about these injuries, he pretended not to know, suggesting that the cat was also responsible for them. Sydney also noticed a towel on Octavia's mattress, which, according to Christian, was there because the child had just vomited. This was another warning sign that should have prompted immediate medical attention. Unconvinced by Christian's explanations, Sydney directly asked Octavia, but the little girl, possibly out of fear or coercion, repeated the story about the cat being responsible for her injuries. At this point, Sydney should have acted decisively, but instead, she decided to wait until Destinee returned from work. Deeply concerned, Sydney and another roommate decided to bring Octavia to Destinee's workplace at the nearby McDonald's to show her the extent of the child's injuries. When Destinee asked what happened, Octavia said that Christian had bitten her. This was a critical moment. The little girl found the courage to tell the truth, exposing her abuser. But even after this admission, none of the adults took the necessary steps to protect the child. At least 2 of Destinee's 3 roommates told authorities that after meeting with Destinee at work, they accompanied her and Octavia to a playground. There, they noticed unusual behavior from Octavia. She showed no interest in playing, stared into space as if having a seizure, and vomited. But none of them thought the girl needed to at least see a doctor. This moment became yet another missed opportunity to save Octavia's life. Instead of seeking medical help, Destinee and her roommates decided to return home. Octavia spent the rest of the day and night in the apartment where the person who had harmed her was present. Her condition clearly deteriorated, but no one took the necessary actions. By the next morning, it was already too late. Octavia was found unconscious with serious injuries that ultimately led to her death. When detectives questioned Sydney, she denied ever witnessing Christian physically abusing Octavia in the past. However, she recalled that Destinee had told her about an incident before they started living together, when Christian had hit Octavia and left a mark. This admission shows that Destinee knew about Christian's tendency toward violence against her daughter, but still allowed him into their lives and to remain near the child. Destinee, when questioned by authorities, claimed she didn't know what had happened while she was at work on the morning of June 14th. She left the apartment around 7 a.m., and her daughter was simply sleeping. She admitted noticing the bite mark on Octavia's skin the day before and asked Christian about it, who continued to claim that the cat was to blame. In a separate interview, Destinee revealed that Octavia had told her that Christian, her 16-year-old boyfriend, had bitten her and covered her mouth. Not believing Christian's claims, Destinee decided to trick him by stating that a camera in the living room would reveal the truth. That's when Christian confessed to biting Octavia, but tried to justify his actions by claiming that the 4-year-old girl had bitten him first, and he just wanted to teach her a lesson. Destinee's relatives strongly doubt this version, describing the little girl as exceptionally sweet and gentle, claiming she would only resort to biting in self-defense. Those who knew Octavia well say she was a gentle and loving child who never showed aggression without cause. After confronting Christian, Destinee observed strange behavior from Octavia throughout the day, noting that the child ate nothing except a bag of Cheetos. When asked about the roommate's account of Octavia vomiting the previous evening, Destinee confirmed the incident, but attributed it to the child's anxiety. This is yet another example of how the adults in Octavia's life ignored obvious signs that something was seriously wrong with the child. The investigator continued to press Destinee, asking if Octavia's symptoms could have resulted from Christian biting and choking her daughter, to which Destinee acknowledged this possibility. She admitted being afraid of the consequences Christian might face if she reported the bite mark to the police, fearing he would be taken from the home and that they would both face legal consequences. Sadly, Destinee was much more concerned about her boyfriend's fate than her own daughter's problems. Her decisions were driven not by concern for Octavia's well-being, but by a desire to protect Christian and their relationship. This led to a chain of decisions that ultimately cost an innocent child her life. Octavia's family remained at the hospital, praying for a miracle. The girl lay motionless, covered with her favorite blanket from home. The medical staff did everything possible, but the injuries were too severe. A day later, it became clear that the girl had almost no chance. Her brain had swollen so much that a spinal herniation occurred. On June 16th, Octavia quietly passed away, surrounded by the relatives who loved her. Her family was devastated with grief but found the strength to make an important decision. Little Octavia left our world but gave other children a chance at life by becoming an organ donor. Her father Brandon, grandmother Linda, Uncle Caleb, and several other family members accompanied her to the operating room. This was the last gesture of love for the girl whose life had ended so tragically, and a way to ensure her legacy would live on in those she helped. An autopsy was also performed to determine the exact cause of death. It was established that Octavia died due to blunt trauma to the head and neck. These findings confirmed investigators' suspicions that the girl had been subjected to severe violence that led to fatal injuries. News channels erupted with reports of the little girl's murder, revealing the ugly truth about her mother and 16-year-old boyfriend. Investigators reported that Destinee Rhodes was now charged with dependent neglect resulting in death, while her boyfriend, 16-year-old Christian Gonzalez, was charged with the girl's murder. Officials stated he would be tried as an adult. Linda Alvarez, for whom her little granddaughter was the center of the universe, couldn't come to terms with the loss. She was just one of the happiest, always smiling, energetic little girls I've ever met in my life, she said with tears in her eyes. For her and the entire Aquino family, Octavia's loss left a wound that would never heal. The adults in the Alvarez Aquino family couldn't find the right words to explain to Caleb's young son why he could no longer play with Octavia. My other son has a son who's only 2 years old, and he kept asking, "Daddy, when is Octavia coming to play with me?" And we don't know how to explain to a 2-year-old that his cousin won't be playing with him anymore. These words illustrate the depth of loss the family experienced, and the difficulty of explaining such a tragedy to the youngest and most vulnerable. For the family, it was also a huge blow that they themselves had brought the girl to the home where her mother was hiding Christian Gonzalez, who had previously abused Octavia. If they had known about Christian's presence in Destinee's life and the danger he posed to Octavia, they would never have allowed the girl to stay with her mother. This realization added bitterness to their already unbearable pain. It was also hard to accept the fact that the mother and her friends had many opportunities to seek help and prevent the girl's death. During Octavia's last 24 hours of life, there were several moments when adults could have intervened and changed the course of events. But each time they chose the path of least resistance, not wanting to create problems or interfere in others' affairs. This collective refusal to act ultimately led to the tragic outcome. This difficult situation led the family to believe that some things required intervention at the Indiana state level. Thus was born the idea of Octavia's Law. The essence is to require any adult, not just teachers, doctors, and social workers, to report signs of child abuse. "I felt from the beginning that the roommates should have been charged with something," Linda said. "They admitted to the police that the day before, they noticed bruises all over my granddaughter's body, around her neck, on her arms, on her face. They noticed bite marks on her arms. They did nothing. If they had done something and taken her to the hospital, gotten her checked out, maybe the doctors would have noticed the brain swelling and could have done emergency surgery or something like that and saved my granddaughter." Linda believes that if Destinee's roommates had been legally obligated to report suspected child abuse, they might have saved Octavia's life. In her opinion, any adult who notices signs of child abuse should be held responsible for inaction. This call to expand responsibility for child protection resonated with many Indiana residents, and the Octavia's Law initiative began gaining momentum. Supporters of Octavia's Law argue that if there had been a legal obligation for all adults to report suspected child abuse, with appropriate penalties for non-compliance, Destinee's roommates might have acted more decisively. Instead of merely discussing among themselves the strange bruises and the girl's behavior, they could have contacted authorities who would have had the power to intervene and protect the child. As for Christian Gonzalez's trial, justice was surprisingly swift and efficient. He was tried as an adult, and the prosecution successfully proved all charges. Investigators were able to reconstruct Octavia's final days and present evidence that Christian's actions led to her death. On February 21, 2025, 16-year-old Christian Gonzalez was sentenced to 60 years in prison. This harsh sentence reflected the severity of his crime and was met with public approval. Meanwhile, the case against Octavia's mother progressed more slowly. Rhodes is charged with dependent neglect resulting in death, contributing to juvenile delinquency where the crime committed by the child is murder and invasion of privacy. Her trial was supposed to take place in March 2025, but was postponed to summer. This new delay became an additional trial for Octavia's family, who wanted justice to be served as soon as possible. It will be really interesting to see what punishment will be chosen for a woman whose immature thinking and disregard for her daughter's safety and health led to a horrible tragedy, local lawyers commented. Many believe that Destinee should be held responsible not only for violating the protective order, but also for creating a dangerous environment for her child and for refusing to seek medical help when it was clearly necessary. Octavia's story resonated widely not only in Indiana but beyond its borders. It became a bitter reminder of how important it is to vigilantly watch for signs of child abuse and act decisively when suspicions arise. This story also highlighted flaws in the child protection system that should have protected Octavia, but failed to do so. One of the most painful aspects of this tragedy is how many opportunities were missed to save the little girl's life. The child protection system didn't respond properly to warning signs in the mother's behavior. Roommates noticed signs of abuse but didn't take sufficient action. Destinee learned that her boyfriend had harmed her daughter, but chose to protect him rather than the child. Even when Octavia showed clear signs of illness, no one thought it necessary to see a doctor. Each of these moments represented an opportunity to change the course of events and prevent the tragic outcome. But each time, the adults in Octavia's life failed in their responsibility, and as a result, the little girl paid the ultimate price. Brandon and Linda, Octavia's father and grandmother, now have to live not only with their pain, but also with the agonizing realization that they themselves brought the girl to her mother, unaware of the danger that threatened her there. "We should have suspected something," Brandon said in one interview. "We knew Destinee had problems, but we never thought she would put Octavia in such danger. If only we had known." This feeling of guilt and regret is shared by many who were involved in Octavia's life. But perhaps the heaviest responsibility lies with the system that was supposed to protect vulnerable children. How could it be that Destinee, who had already been caught violating the law in connection with a minor, still had custody rights over her child? Why didn't anyone check Octavia's living conditions when it became known that Destinee violated the protective order? These questions remain unanswered, but they have prompted many to demand reform of the child protection system. The proposed Octavia's Law is just the first step. Activists and lawmakers are also discussing other measures, including stricter screening of parents with a history of offenses, closer cooperation between various agencies responsible for child welfare, and increased resources for child protective services. While these debates continue, Octavia's family is trying to cope with their loss and find ways to honor the little girl's memory. They created the Octavia Charitable Foundation, which raises funds for children in dangerous home conditions. They also actively advocate for the passage of Octavia's Law and other measures aimed at protecting children. "We can't bring Octavia back," Linda said, "but we can try to ensure that what happened to her doesn't happen to another child. If something good comes out of her tragedy, it will be some consolation." In memory of Octavia, the local community organized a memorial ceremony where balloons in her favorite colors, pink and purple, were released into the sky. The playground where Octavia loved to play was named in her honor, and a memorial plaque was installed with her photograph and the words, "In memory of Octavia Aquino, whose smile lit up the world." These gestures can't bring back the little girl, but they ensure that her short life won't be forgotten. For many, Octavia's story became a call to action. Parents became more vigilant about signs of child abuse, teachers and social workers more persistent in their efforts to protect children. Local authorities began reviewing their protocols and procedures related to child protection, and Indiana state legislators are seriously considering the Octavia's Law proposal. Although these changes can't bring Octavia back or lessen her family's pain, they give hope that something positive might come from this tragedy. If Octavia's Law is passed, if child protection systems are strengthened, if adults become more responsible for protecting vulnerable children, then perhaps Octavia's death won't have been entirely in vain. In March 2025, when Destinee's trial was postponed, Octavia's family expressed their disappointment, but also their determination to continue fighting for justice. "We'll be there at every court hearing," Brandon said. "We'll be Octavia's voice because she can no longer speak for herself. And we'll continue pushing for changes that we hope will protect other children from the fate that befell our little girl." Octavia Aquino's story reminds us of the darkest sides of human nature, but also of the strength of a community coming together in the face of tragedy. It reminds us of our collective responsibility to protect society's most vulnerable members and the need to be vigilant and act decisively when we suspect a child is in danger. Ultimately, Octavia's story is one of love, loss, and hope, about the love of a family that mourns her, about a loss that can never be replaced, and about hope that her short life might still lead to changes that will save other children from a similar fate. Octavia's case became a catalyst not only for the local communities of Evansville and Fort Wayne, but for the entire state of Indiana. The story of a little girl whose life was cut short by adult negligence and failures in the child protection system forced many to reconsider their attitude toward responsibility for children's welfare. Indiana Social Services began an internal investigation to understand how they could have missed such obvious signs of danger to Octavia. Questions arose about why violation of the protective order didn't lead to an automatic review of the child's living conditions, and why Destinee's previous history of problematic behavior didn't become grounds for closer monitoring. Local schools and daycare centers began conducting additional training for their staff, teaching them to recognize signs of abuse and understand when and how to intervene. Many educational institutions introduced new protocols requiring mandatory reporting of any suspicious injuries or changes in children's behavior. The medical community also responded to the tragedy. Hospitals and clinics reviewed their procedures for admitting children with injuries, emphasizing the importance of thorough documentation and immediate reporting of suspicious cases. Pediatricians began conducting more detailed examinations and communicating more actively with parents about signs of stress in children. Octavia's family didn't limit themselves to fighting for new legislation. They began an educational campaign, speaking at schools, community centers, and on television, telling Octavia's story and explaining why it's so important not to remain silent when you see signs of child abuse. Linda Alvarez became particularly active in advocating for this cause, transforming her pain into a mission to prevent similar tragedies. Psychologists and child protection specialists emphasize that Octavia's case demonstrates the classic problem of the bystander effect, when multiple people see a problem but no one acts, believing someone else will do it. All three roommates saw troubling signs, but each waited for the other to take more decisive action. As Destinee Rhodes' trial approached, public interest in the case only grew. Many wondered what punishment would be sufficient for a mother who not only put her daughter in danger, but actively ignored clear signs of abuse. Prosecutors prepared an extensive case, including roommates' testimonies, medical reports, and evidence that Destinee consciously violated the protective order. Octavia's family continues to honor the girl's memory, organizing annual events on her birthday. At the playground named after Octavia, they planted pink and purple flowers, her favorites. Every year on May 10th, children from local schools come here to honor the memory of the little girl and learn an important lesson about how crucial it is to speak up when you see someone in trouble. Octavia Aquino's story isn't just a story about tragedy. It's a story about how one small life, lived for just 4 years, managed to change an entire community and possibly save countless other children in the future. It's a reminder that protecting children is everyone's responsibility, and that silence in the face of cruelty can have fatal consequences. Our deepest condolences to the family of little Angel Octavia. May her memory become a beacon for those fighting for the safety and well-being of all children. Rest in peace, little Angel Octavia.